The fifth step in the U.S. Secret Service operational guide is establish assessment procedures. Welcome back. I'm Kyle Anderson.
And I'm Holly Hollingsworth. Let's note right off the top that when it comes to the assessment procedures followed by a threat assessment team, the team must address any safety concerns first, address those immediately before the rest of these procedures take place.
Beyond the initial safety concerns, the threat assessment team aims to form an accurate picture of the student's thinking, behavior, and circumstances. This informs the team's assessment and helps the team identify appropriate interventions.
There are three components that, when combined together, will give the team a 360-degree threat assessment picture. They are the 13 themes to guide threat assessment investigations set forth by the U.S. Secret Service, the decision tree utilized within Dr. Cornell's threat assessment guidelines, and the community systems approach suggested by the Secret Service. Using the community systems approach means identifying the sources that may have information on the student's actions and circumstances. Some of these sources could be classmates, teachers, family, social contacts, hobbies, an employer, online activity, law enforcement or judicial interactions, and neighbors.
Let's discuss the first component of the 360-degree assessment picture equation, the 13 themes for threat assessment investigations from the Secret Service. Dr. Lena Althari of the Secret Service starts us off.
We have to have a comprehensive assessment, and the way we do that is we look at the motive, why they engaged in the behavior that elicited concern or communications. What's going on in their lives? Are they having setbacks, losses, and challenges that they're not able to cope with? All of that really is the comprehensive approach.
So the 13 themes for threat assessment investigations are topics the team should investigate, such as what are the student's motives and goals? Has the student exhibited concerning, unusual, or threatening communications? Are they showing any inappropriate interests, and do they have access to weapons? Have there been recent stressful events in their life? Dr. Althari discussed this particular theme when she spoke at the Ohio Attorney General's Law Enforcement Conference in October of 2019.
One of the biggest factors is that every single attacker experienced a significant stressor prior to their attack. And in that age population, that included a breakup, a big loss, being bullied, being kicked off a team that really meant a lot to them. So it takes the form usually of social stressors, family life stressors, or other different stressors. So if someone is engaging in a behavior that's concerning, we want to find out what's happening at home. One of the big factors that we're looking at in the new study that hadn't been looked at before is home life. And I can tell you almost every single attacker had significant home life issues related to parents experiencing, whether it's abuse, domestic violence, financial strains, and so on, arrest and charges for the parents. So there was a lot of home life situations.
Continuing the 13 threat assessment themes, are there emotional or developmental issues that are causing problems? Can the team find any evidence of desperation, hopelessness, or suicidal behavior? Does the student view violence as a way to solve problems? Are there statements or behaviors causing others to be concerned? Do they have the tools or other capacity to carry out an attack? And is there any evidence that they are planning an attack? Does there seem to be consistency between the students' statements and actions? Or, for example, do they say they're handling a romantic breakup well, yet their social media posts indicate they're struggling to move on? Finally, does the student have any positive or pro-social influences, like a trusting relationship with an adult at school, or a positive connection to a friend at school? So those are the 13 themes, and we talked earlier about the community systems approach. The important element in the middle of our 360-degree threat assessment equation is the decision tree developed by Dr. Dewey Cornell at the University of Virginia.
Paulo Di Maria, Ohio Superintendent of Public Instruction, is an advocate of Dr. Cornell and his decision tree model.
Yeah, I'm familiar with Dr. Cornell's work. And, I think first and foremost, I like the idea of protocols. We all need step-by-step, checklists from time to time just to make sure we're thinking through the right process for doing this kind of work. And the fact that he has put this together based on his own experience and many, many examples of when it's been useful and helpful, and it's been refined over time, that's what makes it really strong. So again, I'm a big advocate. I'm also a believer of making sure that you can configure it to the particular circumstances. I'm always saying there's always there's no one size fits all. So there are guidelines and protocols and a disciplined process, but then we also have to be sensitive to the particular circumstances circumstances in which that work is being done, and the particular partnerships and relationships and what have you.
To provide step-by-step instruction on Dr. Cornell's threat assessment decision tree, we turn now to law enforcement training officers from the Ohio Peace Officer Training Academy.
Hello, I'm Sarah Shendy. I've been a police officer for over 11 years and have spent the past 3.5 years with the Ohio Peace Officers Training Academy, also known as OPATA, which is a part of the Ohio Attorney General's office. I'm a DARE officer, one of the OPATA School Resource Officer instructors, and I also teach the human relation classes at OPATA.
I'm Micah Stoll. I was a police officer in Illinois for 10 years and spent the past 7 with OPATA in the Ohio Attorney General's office. I'm one of the OPATA School Resource Officer instructors. I've also traveled around the state teaching our Active Threat for Educators class. The decision tree is an easy-to-follow model that provides a structured way of assessing concerning behaviors and threats. The first 2 steps are to evaluate the threat and then attempt to resolve it as transient. If the team determines that the threat is transient, the incident is resolved at step 2, and services can be added if needed.
If the incident cannot be resolved as transient, the team moves to step 3, respond to a substantive threat. Several needed actions are spelled out in this step, which guide the team to a serious threat being resolved, and again, services can be added if needed. If the threat is not resolved here, the threat is considered very serious. The team moves on to the last 2 steps, conducts a safety evaluation, and implements and monitors a safety plan. Let's hear from Dr. Cornell himself with a complete description of this decision tree and its steps.
So we have a decision tree in our manual, and we first gather information when a threat or concern has been reported. We first gather information to find out, is this actually a threat or is this something that should be handled in some other way? This is a 5-step process. Not every case goes to step 5. It's a graduated process. The easier, simpler cases are finished in 2 steps. The intermediate cases, 3 steps. And then steps 4 and 5 are reserved for the most serious cases. So step 1, is this a threat? What actually has happened and does it merit a threat assessment? Step 2, can it be resolved as a transient threat, not a serious threat? Then about 75% are resolved at that point. Step 3, a substantive threat, a serious substantive threat, where a student is planning to fight somebody, assault somebody. And so we're really talking about a physical assault, physical injury, not with a weapon. I sometimes say it's sort of like the difference between a misdemeanor and a felony assault. A simple assault where kids want to fight somebody, and gosh, if you work in middle school, the counselors are dealing with this sorts of things fairly often. And with a serious substantive threat, we're going to try to resolve the conflict. We'll notify parents, we'll separate the students or conflicting parties, and we'll try to work that out. And we find about 1/4 of our cases, nearly 1/4, maybe 20%, are resolved at this level, step 3. Now, we thought we would just have, serious and substantive threats and we'd be done with it, but we realized, if a student threatens to shoot somebody or brings a knife to school and wants to stab somebody or wants to, blow up the school, then we've got to go further than that. And so the comprehensive threat assessment is done for what we call very serious substantive threats. Very serious means it's at a felony level for law enforcement, but it means basically that there's a threat of very serious injury or death to a person. And if it's not a transient threat, it's not a, oh, I could kill you figure of speech, but we think the person actually is substantive, serious, then step 4, we're going to temporarily have the student removed from school under supervision. We're going to contact parents to monitor and supervise them. We're going to involve law enforcement to investigate, take any appropriate protective action, look for weapons, that sort of thing. And we're going to do a more thorough mental health screening or assessment of the student. So again, our multidisciplinary team, law enforcement and mental health, are both going to be spending some time with this young person and the situation and the witnesses and gathering information to develop what we call a safety plan. A safety plan is a determination of what are the risk factors for violence and what can we do to reduce those risk factors. It's not a predictive statement. There's no crystal ball. We're not saying, oh, he is going to do it or he's not going to do it. We're saying, why is he making this threatening behavior? What are the risk factors that are pushing toward some type of violent act? And then if we understand the risk factors, why the person made the threat, then it's a process of saying, all right, how can we reduce the risk factors? Does the student have mental health service needs? Do they need education services? What are the problems and concerns? And so we develop that safety plan. And step 5 is the implementation and monitoring of that plan. Because those small number of cases, about 6% of the cases, there's going to be ongoing monitoring of that student over time. And that really tells us, emphasizes that we are going beyond threat assessment. It's threat assessment and intervention, threat assessment and management. We have youngsters that we identify needs in the threat assessment, and once we've identified those needs, we don't walk away from them. They may require an ongoing plan, ongoing services. We've had a few cases where threat assessment seemed to fail, where a student came to attention and they were identified as dangerous in the Arapahoe school shooting, but then the assessment stopped and they didn't continue to support and monitor and refer. And that's something we need to avoid. It's not just enough to do an assessment, but when we identify serious ongoing needs, we've got to take the next step to do that. That when kids make a threat, it's a red flag that they're having a problem. I'll give you an example. I always ask the adults in my audience, when was the last time you threatened someone? And no one wants to say anything. And I say, well, I guess nobody's married here. Nobody has kids. And now all of a sudden everybody remembers making a threat. And I say, well, let's think about the last time you threatened your child. You threatened your child because he wouldn't go to bed, or he didn't do his homework, or he wouldn't get up and to get ready for school. And when you started out, you didn't start off with a threat. What you said was, I'd like you to get up, or time to do your homework, and you used plan A. Plan A is you ask. And then if that doesn't work, you go to plan B, where you beg them. And then plan C, you cajole them. And plan D, you demand them. And as your frustration level goes up and you run out of plans, you go to plan T. Plan T is the end of the alphabet that we all go to, plan threat. When we are frustrated that we cannot solve this problem, we resort to a threat. That's what adults do, and kids do the same thing. When a kid makes a threat, he's basically saying, I've run out of problem-solving strategies, and now I'm using Old Faithful, which is make a threat. And if we approach it that way, we can understand that a lot of these kids are not good problem solvers. They don't have a lot of social competence often. They're immature, of course. They're young. And what we are in schools is we're problem solvers. A threat assessment team, I say, is a team of problem solvers. Let's figure out how to solve this young person's problem, and then the threat goes away.
Dr. Cornell not only provides threat assessment teams with a model to follow, but also accompanying forms for free. The forms are broken into 4 sections: student threat documentation, mental health assessment, behavior intervention plan, and fidelity evaluation. Those forms are available to download for free at www.schoolta.com, which is Dr. Cornell's school threat assessment website.
As we previously mentioned, the goal is to explore the 13 Secret Service themes that guide threat assessment and investigation, the decision tree from Dr. Cornell's guidelines, all while making sure to explore the angles suggested by the Secret Service community system approach. Those are classmates, teachers, family, social, hobbies, employment, online activity, law enforcement, judicial, and neighbors. These components combined will give the team a 360-degree assessment picture of the student. Conducting a threat assessment is not intended to prevent all forms of student violence, but it is a useful means of identifying potentially violent situations that, if investigated properly, might be prevented.
Despite having a comprehensive targeted violence plan in place and a team's best attempts at prevention, targeted violence may still occur.
Our thanks to Ohio Peace Officer Training Academy Law Enforcement Training Officers Sarah Shendy and Micah Stoll.
We'll hear more from them in a video titled Guide to Ohio School Vulnerability Assessments. That video is an additional companion chapter to this series.
While threat assessments focus on people, vulnerability assessments focus on school buildings. We'll explain more about that and that additional training video coming up later in Step 8.
Coming up next, Step 6, develop risk management options.